Why don't I turn to Dan, and the floor is yours to begin presenting.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to share with you some exciting new developments of some disruptive information technologies that are going to expedite the kind of transformation of markets that Mark has been talking about. They're going to bring accountability and transparency, credibility and simplicity, verifiability to the local store, and I think also in the B2B sphere. First of all, what I'm talking about has been made possible by the emergence of a new scientific discipline. It's called industrial ecology, which is an amalgam of engineers and physicists and ecologists and so on, who study in a very fine-grained way the impacts of human systems like industry or transportation on natural systems. And their main method, some of you may be familiar with, is called life cycle assessment. It looks at a given product like, say, a glass jar, and breaks it down into discrete steps that can be studied for their ecological impacts over the entire course of the life cycle of that object. So, for example, for a glass jar that a jam or pasta sauce might come in, industrial ecologists would tell you that that can be examined in terms of 1,959 discrete steps, each of which can be analyzed for a myriad of environmental and health and even social impacts. For example, among the 230 different emissions into air over the production of that glass jar, a caustic soda at the glass factory accounts for 3% of the jar's potential harm to human health, and it also accounts for 6% of the danger to ecosystems. This is just to give you an idea, for those who aren't familiar with LCA, as it's called, of the kind of microscope we now have for the entire range of impacts of consumer products. Stonyfield yogurt, which is popular in the States, just did a study looking at how much of the climate change impacts, greenhouse gases and so on, are remediated if you recycle the yogurt container. It turns out to be about 5%, which means 20 times more impacts are elsewhere in the life cycle of that product. And this is very typical. We've been talking and focusing about what people can do by changing their behavior, but until now, ignoring the massive impacts of industry and commerce on ecosystems, on climate, and on human beings. When you think in terms of this kind of mega analysis of the impacts of anything, you see that what we now talk about in marketing as green is largely a mirage. If a product has 909 discrete steps over its life cycle, and each one has a myriad of impacts, if you change one or two and call it green, that's where the mirage is. Instead of thinking about this as green in a binary way, we really should be thinking about greening in a perpetual process. And new information systems, I think, are going to drive that everywhere in commerce. The first system I want to tell you about is called Good Guide, G-U-I-D-E, Good Guide, which is an aggregation of about 200 databases of environmental, health, and social impacts of companies and products, boils all that down to a simple 10-point scale where 10 is best, 1 is worse, or 0 is worse, based on different environmental, health, and social outcomes. And rates products, right now about 75,000 consumer products, on this scale in a very simple manner. If you want to dig down into the system, you can. It's transparent. This is an independent outfit. It's an offspring of the University of California at Berkeley. An industrial ecologist named Dara O'Rourke is the brains and driver behind it. And this system now creates information symmetry around ecological impacts, where before there was a tremendous asymmetry. That is, sellers knew lots of things that buyers didn't. And now all of a sudden this levels the playing field between buyers and sellers, which shifts power in terms of using this information to make purchase decisions, shifts it to the consumer in a way which I think will go to scale. So far, in the first half year since it launched, Good Guide has had about 3 million individual users and growing. I showed the site to my 9-year-old nephew, Joey, who immediately looked up his favorite toy, which was called a pink pony. And he was dismayed to see that it got a 3.7 on a scale of 10. And when he looked at it, he realized it was because it contains PVCs and antimony, which are toxic substances. And so Joey immediately looked up his other Webkinz favorites and found they all were 8s or 9s, and he was very relieved. But that moment where Joey discovered that his pink pony had a toxin in it, from the point of view of neuroeconomics, elicits the disgust reaction. And this is something new and profound in marketing, because the surfacing of this transparency about the truth behind the things we buy, the story of our stuff, if you will, is going to elicit this en masse. And as a psychologist, I know that this creates what's called the contrast effect, where if you're comparing two products at the same time and you find out something disgusting about one, the other product looks many, many times better as a result of that comparison. And one thing Good Guide does is not just rank your product, but compare it with every other competitive product. So if you're looking at shampoos, you'll see where your shampoo is, what its rating is, why it got that rating, and how every other shampoo you might buy gets that rating. It's also an iPhone app, so you can do this while you're in the grocery store. If people do three things, if they know the true impacts of what they buy through a system like this, if they favor improvements and share what they know with other people, this will go to scale quite rapidly. I know that groups like Greenpeace are looking at this to start a campaign to take it to scale. That in turn should shift market share in favor of the better ecological impact products. And as market share shifts, it will be incumbent on companies to do what they can to improve their ecological impacts to chase that market. This creates what's called a virtuous cycle, where individual consumer decisions taken to scale create a market incentive for companies to do the better thing. And I see that as the main mechanism that these disruptive information technologies are going to create. If you think about the millennials, the college student age kids and down, they are passionate about the environment, about ecology, toxins, and so on, in a way older generations just aren't. And I think that smart companies will see sustainability not just as the right thing to do, but as a smart thing to do.